Record. So good morning, everyone. Again, I am glad to see you, and it's always a pleasure. And we're talking about a quiet mind, how to do it. And mostly what I'd like to talk about is the benefits of having a quiet mind, why we do it. And primarily, the biggest reason is so that we can meditate. Because you know what they say, that there's a still small voice in there. And I think whoever wrote that knew what he was doing, because he knew that if he said it was a very quiet voice, that we'd all listen that much harder, right? And in order to listen, you've got to quiet your mind. Because if you've got chatter going on, you're not going to be able to hear anything. And also, you know, the benefit of having a quiet mind enables us to pay attention in our everyday activity, because the object of having a quiet mind is so that you can focus your attention, and then instead of receiving information from your mind, which is constantly trying to fill in the gaps and trying to interpret what it's seeing, if you are able to quiet that, then the information you're receiving is from out there, right? You're receiving the information from the thing that you're focused on. And that's a big difference, because most of the time we don't see what we're looking at. We only see our interpretation of it. That's how the brain works. But if we quiet the brain, the thinking part of the brain, then our observation skills become much greater. And as our observation skills get greater, our memory gets better, because we have a better impression every time we look at something. So having a quiet mind is primarily, and the reason I'm teaching it is so that you can meditate better, because we're all pretty good at paying attention in the world and keeping our mind on what we're doing. You know, it's never perfect, but we can do it a lot better than a lot of people can, you know, just based on how successful we are in our lives, right? Because if you can't hold your attention on one thing, you're just not going to make it very far. So you'll always have problems. Things will slip through the cracks and you're in trouble constantly. So having a quiet mind and knowing how to pay attention, these are real important skills to have. But for meditation, the reality that we are faced with when we go within is a kind of barrier. When we turn around, or not turn around, but just back up into to our inner space, we reach a point where there's a barrier, but it's a soft barrier. It's called the veil. In the old Jewish temple, they had the Holy of Holies, which was an inner room where the high priest would only go in once a year and receive guidance for the people. And in that room, they had the Ark of the Covenant, the 7-branch candlestick, other various sacred objects. And but the interesting thing is, you would think a room that housed those kinds of icons would be a vault, you know, with a solid door that you know, under lock and key. But it wasn't. It just had a veil. It had a curtain. And this, of course, is living symbolism, because the temple symbolizes the human body, just as our cathedrals do today. They're always laid out in cruciform, and the altar is where the heart is. So in the Hebrew temple, they had this room, and it was separated by a veil. And the interesting thing about a veil is you can't see through it. This is not a sheer curtain. This is a solid fabric veil, heavy. But though you can't see through it, you can hear through it. See, You can hear what's going on in there. And so that's what we're striving to do when we meditate, is to really put our ear up against the veil and hear what's going on in there. And the more we attune ourselves with that vibration, because it's a different vibration, it's a higher vibration, the more we attune ourselves with that, then the more transformative power it has over us. And at some point, we're going to go through that veil, and we're going to go into the Holy of Holies itself. In the Holy Order of Mans, this is what we call the initiation of self-realization. Teacher goes in and splits that veil. Just like when Jesus died on the cross, it says in the Bible that the temple veil was rent in twain, just ripped in half. That's the experience of the initiation of self-realization. And then that gives us direct access to that level of vibration, that state of consciousness. And so this is really the goal and the purpose of meditation, is to bring us closer to the self of God, to the God self. And this is very important. I mean, if you're on the spiritual path, this is what it's all about, God realization. Even in the Eastern Orthodox churches, they talk about something called theosis, which is essentially becoming one with God. And this is what we're striving for, right? I mean, we look around at the world, and something inside of us tells us, this is not my home. This is a strange place. We feel like strangers in a strange land. And so that's the impetus. In fact, that's actually the very first initiation. And an initiation is a shift in consciousness, and I mean a real shift, a fundamental shift, where you become a different person as a result of your consciousness going through an expansion. And the first initiation, the first thing that sets us on the spiritual path, is the realization that there's something not quite right about the world. It almost seems like the world is on something, like a screen. We think that, we look and it feels like it's painted on something, and in an odd three-dimensional way. It's like a hologram that conceals a hologram that's within it. You see, so our motivation, our prime motivation for going into meditation and for stepping on the spiritual path, is to figure out what the hell is going on here, because this isn't real. Something about it's not real, or something about it, there's something about this plane of vibration, this experience that we're having, that is concealing something greater. You see, and everybody loves a secret, so that impels us to get it, to find a corner, find an edge of this illusion, and peel it up and then peel it back, right? And so we can look behind it. And you've all seen that old woodcut painting of the alchemist. He's in a natural environment, but there's a dome over it, and on the outside of the dome there's the stars, all the cosmos, and he has he's on his hands and knees, but he's got his head poked through the dome. And so he's becoming aware of this greater consciousness. That's us. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to pierce the veil of illusion so that we can see what's really going on. Because we have this intuition that the things that appear in our lives are not really caused by actions here. That there's something, that the reason things manifest here is a result of action on another plane. And that's a profound realization. That's why we teach the law of mind, teaching people how to pray so that they can get accustomed to working on two planes at once, where you go in, we say, contact the Father. And when we do that in consciousness, we poke through that dome. and we get aware of the cosmos, the cosmic dimension, and then we put a pattern in there. We see what we want, we feel it, we put that pattern there, and then we come back out of that cosmic zone and into our lives, and we forget about it. But what we find is that implantation that we did is a seed, and that seed then starts to germinate and starts to grow, and eventually will reveal itself on this plane, and it will poke through. It'll come through this hologram or this this experience we're having. It'll manifest through what's going on here, but it's really coming from that cosmological dimension. So we want to have a quiet mind so that we can meditate better, so that we can get past the illusion of this world. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying that this world is an illusion. I think it's because it's real. I mean, this place is real. It's a real plane of manifestation. But what I'm saying is our perception of what here is extremely limited. We know even that the spectrum of light that we're able to perceive is a very small band of the entire spectrum. Almost all of it is invisible to us. So that right there constitutes an illusionary kind of experience, because we just don't see what's going on here. We don't see, the different solar radiations. We don't see the electricity running through the walls. We don't see infrared, ultraviolet. There's so much we don't see. The list is endless. And yet a lot of those things have a direct impact on us. And so they're real. And in some ways, they're more real than the small sliver of reality that we see. And all of this is on purpose. This is not by accident. This is set up this way because we've entered into this range of reality, this bandwidth, you might say. And in order to survive here, or even to be here, we need a vehicle. And in order to maintain the vehicle, we have to be focused on what's going on around us. So the brain is set up to do that. It's not set up to look into higher worlds. So when we step foot on the spiritual path, we are really doing what you might call an unnatural activity. See, this is not something that just comes to us by default. We pretty much have to create it. And by creating it, I mean, we have to do the mental exercises and the spiritual acts of service and of devotion and these things that lead us away from the entombment of our consciousness within the physical body, so that we can poke through, rise up in vibration, so that we can then perceive that which is of a higher vibration. If we don't do anything, we just get better and better at reconnoitering this plane of manifestation, making life better here. But just think how much even better it could be here if we understand these basic cosmic laws that are really shaping our lives. You know, one of the biggest complaints people have is we don't know why things happen. You know, we think things happen by accident. We think things happen randomly. We think that tragedy befalls us just because of bad luck. And all of those terms belie the belief we have that this is all there is. It's like if you're watching a play in the theater and curtain goes up, and there are the actors in a particular set, and act one comes to an end, the curtain comes down, curtain goes back up, it's in a whole different scene. You know, and what I'm talking about would be the equivalent of, oh my God, it's a miracle. the whole set has changed. And that's the way we experience life here, is that every time we turn around, something major changes. We don't know why. So that's reason enough right there to meditate and to become more aware of reality, of the greater dimensions of reality, so that we can understand why things happen the way they do here. We start to understand things like karma, prayer. We can understand the sometime, when we experience synchronicities, why things seem to happen fortuitously. We have no idea how or why. They defy all logical explanation, but they happen. We know they happen. We know they're real. So this helps us understand things like that. And it helps us understand things like the connection, the even telepathic connection we have with each other at times. We know those things are real. And there are too many synchronicities or too many events where somebody calls and you say, wow, I was just thinking about you. So we've realized that this three-dimensional world we live in is somehow kind of an inside-out version. It's like pushing your hand into a sock and grabbing it and pulling it inside out. Or if you have a model of a cube and it's got its hinge and you can kind of turn it inside out. You've seen probably diagrams of what that looks like. So we have this intuition that we're living in an inside out world. And so this is why we train our minds. And our mind needs training if we want to transcend the limitations of our senses, because these senses are all set up for this plane, for this planet. Plane is right in the word planet. This is a plane of manifestation. It is a vibrational range. It's a frequency. It's a specific frequency range. That's where we're at, and this body is made to function here. So in order to progress on the spiritual path, we have to master this body to a degree. And part of mastering the body is mastering our thinking. So let me open it up for questions and see if you'd like to add something or ask.
Michael, how about if you talk about in your experience, what is a quiet mind? I assume I hear what you're saying. I understand the various concepts. Buddhists call it the monkey mind, or sitting down and chatter in my head that I can't control. But so that's an unquiet mind for sure. But what is the quality of a quiet mind?
That's a
Complete
great
silence?
question. That's a great question. And so what is a quiet mind? We have to be able to think. But there's a big difference between deliberate thinking and mindless thinking. That mindless thinking is what we call the monkey mind, or the automatic mind, or the chatter in our heads, right? So that's what's it like to think clearly with a clean background. You see, because a lot of the times when we are deliberately thinking, we've got noise in the background. It's like we're in a room and there are other people. It's like sitting in Starbucks. You're working on your computer, concentrating, but in the background, there's all kinds of noise. And that's usually what it's like for us individually in our inner life, is there's this constant background noise. And that's distracting. And it also becomes like a curtain or a barrier that filters what's coming from underneath that layer of background noise. You see, that background noise is kind of like patterns on the veil that separates us from the higher world. So as information comes to us from within, it has to go through that layer of chatter, and that can affect the signal. So having a quiet mind is not stopping thinking altogether, it's quieting the background chatter, the background noise, the meaningless noise that keeps us from getting that pure, clear signal from within. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I think in my experience, that concept of quieting the mind can be a stumbling block, because not knowing what does it mean? Stop thinking? I can't, no, it doesn't mean that.
Right,
But describing the
right.
chatter, yes,
Yes.
that is, yes, very helpful. Thank you.
Now, the more we do this, the more we silence that background chatter, then the easier it becomes to truly switch off the thinking altogether. Because if you, in deliberate thinking, you think about something and then you stop thinking about it. But normally that's when the background chatter would rush to the fore, and then you're in a state of chaotic movement. So the more you can quiet that background layer, then the easier it becomes. And then it's as dramatic as turning off a light switch. It's remarkable, and I'm sure you've maybe experienced it, especially in states of deep relaxation, where you just really relax, and then the mind just coasts to a halt, and then it's like a blessed silence, and it's such a relief, such a wonderful experience just to have the mind turn off, for the voice, the chattering voices to turn off. And it gives one a marvelous sense of being in the present moment, and very relaxed, and you can even feel the cells in your body responding and begin to rejuvenate at a level that surpasses what they normally do. So having a quiet mind has health benefits, of course, but that's really where it begins. The work really is to silence that background layer. And once we do that, then our mind becomes a much more powerful tool, so that when we do think deliberately, it's amazing the levels of understanding that we can achieve, and the depth of perception we can achieve. The world starts to open up in ways that are just extraordinary. So, and some of the greatest thinkers in the world have gone through this process and learned how to truly concentrate and truly quiet that background layer. And from them we got genius, like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Isaac Newton, all of these people, past few hundred years and longer, have given us our most significant breakthroughs. And so everyone is capable of having significant breakthroughs. So we want to tap into that greater consciousness that we're carrying around with us incognito. We rarely let it out, but it takes work. It takes work to get in there and find it. And
Michael,
that's
I have a question.
Yes.
Conditioning, or how we've been brought up and how we've been conditioned to think about certain things. Would that conditioning be considered the background noise, because it can affect the thoughts that come through, right?
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
okay, like having been born in the South and raised, by a grandmother who had, someone working for the family as a cook and a cleaner and all that, and her attitudes and about certain things kind of being pounded into me as I was growing up, because I heard it over and over again. Not that it's any truth, but when thoughts would come, when thoughts come through, attitudes that I've received from others through the years that have seemingly become part of me can affect messages that come through. Is that part of what you're talking about with the background noise?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes, it
I've heard
is.
that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like the snakes are subterranean creatures. That's how we associate them, and that's part of their symbolism. Why we use snakes as a symbol. Like in the Garden of Eden, and the snake wrapped around the staff that Moses lifted in the wilderness, so when people looked on it, they would be healed. And in Hinduism, the way the snake symbolizes the Kundalini and the Ida and the Pingala currents. The interesting thing about a snake is it has a skin and it molts. So periodically, that outer layer of skin dries and it detaches from, the subcutaneous layer of skin, and the snake then crawls out of that old skin. Now, all of that conditioning you got from your nanny, that's like a skin. So through the natural cycle of death and rebirth, that skin can be sloughed off. But what we as humans, if we don't do anything, the old skin will imprint, so to speak, onto the new skin, and those patterns, those beliefs, those conditionings will just be transferred to the new skin, and you perpetuate those beliefs. But if you're spiritually aware and you're working towards higher states of consciousness, then you come to find out that it's in the transition stage between the old skin and the new skin that you have enormous opportunity to create new patterns. So that's why
it's like the regeneration of the cells. We're talking about every 7 years the cells regenerate. So according to the consciousness at that time, impressing its patterns on the cells, you can think of it like that too.
Yes, exactly. So all of these, the Rosicrucians are big into that. They talk about the 7-year cycle. In the first 7 years, we lose our baby teeth. Second 7 years, we go through puberty. The third, we're like no longer a child, but we're not yet an adult. And then the fourth cycle, we actually come into possession of our own mind and we become a full-fledged adult. And then there are stages after that. So this 7-year cycle is really ingrained within us. And it's part of our not only our biology, but our spiritual makeup. So what we do in spiritual science is we harness that cyclic activity. That's kind of the whole secret of alchemy and New Age or New Thought work, getting your prayers answered, that kind of thing. It's not by creating something out of whole cloth. It's by identifying something that's already there and modifying it. This really works. It's very powerful. It's hard as hell to create something out of nothing, like just manifest something out of thin air. But if you can spot a cycle that's already in motion and learn how to steer it, even slightly, then you can change how it manifests. You know, and I've used this example many times. It comes out of the Order's first level lessons, where if you're a farmer, you have a barn, and every time the lightning strikes the barn, it starts a fire you have to go and put out. So you learn that if you put a steel rod on top of the barn and you connect that rod with a wire and tie the wire to a metal stake and drive it into the ground, then the lightning hits the lightning rod and the energy is spent harmlessly. It just goes right to ground, no problem. So that's a pattern, right? You figured out, okay, this is one way to mitigate the problem of the lightning making fire, you know, causing a fire. But then you realize, oh, okay, so here's a pattern here. How can I use it? I've got all this energy. How can I put it to use? So he figures out if he takes the wire and instead of running it right to ground, he drops it down his well. Then every time the lightning strikes, it purifies the water. That's the kind of thinking we want to engage when we're working with spiritual law. We want to identify cycles, and in this case, we're looking at our own 7-year cycles, which is scalable. You know, it doesn't take 7, you know, solar orbits. It's like there's also 7 days in a week, right? 7 is a symbolic number. So if we know that there's a cyclic renewal pattern going on within us, and we can identify it, then we can catch it at the right point and start adding in new information deliberately, right? Consciously and deliberately. That's why we emphasize the conscious mind in the West, you know, the eye of Horus, the open eye of God, the circle with the dot in the center. We emphasize conscious thinking because that's our tool for changing that which is below the threshold of our conscious thinking, that which we can't see about ourselves. We know that by our thoughts, we can steer our own spiritual evolution. And in you know, in the popular literature on spirituality, we talk about things like gratitude. You know, and we know that if we really allow ourselves to feel grateful or deliberately make ourselves feel grateful, that has a profound effect on the rest of everything else we experience. Changes everything if we're consistent. So what we're doing when we say affirmations and that kind of thing is or saying prayers by rote. You know, and it doesn't really matter if you think well, you really shouldn't. Like when you say the Our Father, you don't want to think about what it means. You just want to say it and let it rise up from within you. But by doing those kinds of spiritual exercises, you start to change the background chatter. You organize it. You give it coherent patterns so that you've got that tape running in the background, but it's a tape that you recorded. And then in these transition phases where you're moving from, you know, when you're molting, spiritually molting, when that process takes place, those patterns then get impressed into the cycle. They get added into the cycle. And then over time, over and over and over again, we start to see real transformation, real changes in our physical being, our mental, emotional, spiritual makeup. Everything starts to reflect these changes that we put in there. You see, this is the unnatural part. It's like it's like riding a big horse. We have to be on top of the horse. You see, in our whole the natural part of our being is like that big horse. We have to be on top of it. And we're not going to make the horse do anything, but we can definitely train it into a mutual cooperation, right? We train a horse to do what we want it to do, but we have to do it subtly and over time. And we have to develop trust. All of these things are reflected in this cyclical activity that's going on within us, that once we understand it, then we can start to work with it.
So, Michael, I have a question. May I ask it at this point?
Yes, certainly.
Going back to Tom's question about a quiet mind, what is it? I'm hearing you and it sounds great, but I have a question. The greatest transformation I've ever had in my life was when the mind was still.
Yes.
So I'm wondering how that fits in with your teachings today. And I've always wondered about, and you just kind of gave us a glimpse, you touched on the edge of how is prayer effective?
Okay. Well, let's take the first part of your question in regards to, having a perfectly still mind. That's what we're shooting for, because when we're absolutely still, then we're most receptive toward impressions from deeper in. So that's really what we're shooting for. When we sit in meditation, we want to have a perfectly quiet mind. But if we try to force that, then that requires a lot of willpower. And the second we let down our effort, then everything just comes rushing back in even greater than it was before.
Excuse me, Michael, but it's sounding like, as I'm listening to you, that wasn't what we were shooting for. We were shooting for trying to control, input, thinking, controlled thinking. So am I missing the point there?
Well, no, you're seeing it, but let me just clarify then.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked the question, because I can see how it arose. So there's a difference between it's like planting seeds in a garden, right? When we use deliberate thinking to change the patterns of the background mind, it's like planting a seed in a garden. And there are definite steps we take. First, we have to prepare the soil, and we have to do it at the right time. And once we plant the seed and we give it a little bit of water, then we have to leave it alone. We can't go out every day and dig it up and see if it's germinating. If we do, we'll ruin it. So this controlled thinking that you're asking about, maybe it's better to say it's deliberate. It's deliberate thinking, but it's contained. It's like a packet, it's like a seed. So we devise, say we devise a saying such as, I am always in perfect harmony with God. Things happen smoothly and effortlessly in my life. Everything that I need comes to me when I need it. I am perfectly confident in the all-present love of God. Something like that, right? Pretty good for right off the top of my head, right? So we have that, and we make it we package it. That's like an affirmation. We package it, we memorize it, and then we go into meditation, we get really quiet as we can, and then we say that. But as we say it, we release it into that background mind. We let it go. We can feel it move back within us into that vast space behind us. And that's the act of planting the seed. And then we forget about it, right? Then we just go back to our daily life. And that's where we want to practice concentration, which simply means don't be doing something with your hands and have your mind elsewhere. You know, if you're doing something with your hands, keep your attention there and your thoughts there with it. That helps train the mind. So the only control is planting that seed. And then you have to completely let go of control. Because just as when you plant a seed in the garden, you have to let go to nature. You have to let nature take over. And you don't know how it does it. It's a miracle. So we use the same model for planting seeds in the subconscious. We carefully package the seed and then put it in there. So your experience of having, when it happened as a result of when your mind was quiet, that is the result of something. Maybe it was your aspiration. Maybe it was your thoughts, thinking about God or reality, sensing, that there's something more, you just can't quite put your finger on it. But that's a desire. You see, there's a desire there, and that desire is what starts the process, and then boom, it happened. And then once it does happen, then you've got a baseline. Then you know where to look. Does that
Question,
answer that
or-
for you? Oh, okay.
I was just gonna, go ahead, Lorraine, you're muted right now.
Yeah, just a minute. My second part was how do about prayer. How do we know it's effective? How is it effective? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I didn't get my face.
No,
No
yeah,
problem.
I forgot that part.
That's good.
So how do we know that prayer is effective?
Well, how is it effective?
Well, let's start with the fact that it is effective, and the way we know that is by getting our prayers answered. And this is where it really gets fun, because once you do it deliberately and you see that prayer works, it just blows your mind. It's the one thing that creates more converts than anything else. I'll give you an example, and then we'll talk about how it works. When I was 19, I hitchhiked from Reno, Nevada down to Mexicali on the California border, and took a 3-day train ride down to Mexico City to visit my aunt, who's a nun. She'd been a nun for like 50 years at that point, and she ran a convent school in Mexico City. So I went down and stayed with her for a couple of weeks, and then did some other things, and then said goodbye and repeated the process, rode the train back up to Mexicali, and then hitchhiked from Mexicali back to Reno. Well, on my way down, when I started my trip, that hitchhiking trip was very difficult and dangerous. There was one time where my life was kind of in danger, just because of the people involved. And it took me multiple rides just to get to the train. But when I was there with my aunt, she said she would pray for me that my trip home would be smooth, uneventful, and quick. And so I get off the train in Mexicali and go to the highway and put my thumb out, this trucker picks me up. He takes me all the way to Reno. And I've got a sleeper cab. I've got, it's just a breeze. And so that wasn't lost on me, because it was in such stark contrast. It was like, oh my God, this really works. I could feel it. I could feel that what I was experiencing was a direct result of her prayers. This was the grace of God reaching into my life and making it better. So that's just an example, right? And I don't think I've ever met anybody who hasn't had, some version of that, larger or smaller, it doesn't matter. But as to how that works, we're back to the seed again, where say you want a new house, and this is really what you want, right? It's really what you want. Everything in your life has brought you to the crossroads where you realize that the most important thing to you at this point in your life is to have a new house. So where the city you want to live in, basically the kind of house you want, the price range, everything, you fill in all the details. So that's your package, that's your seed. And you take that seed and you drop it into the background mind. And it goes, through that veil into the Holy of Holies, where God picks it up and then puts all of the natural forces into motion that will bring you together with that house. You see, you're not creating a house. A house just doesn't spring up out of the ground. You're going to be drawn to the house that most closely matches what you are praying for. And because everything is connected, even your idea of a house will be somewhat informed by a house that already exists. And as you think about your ideal house, this house that's already there that has the clearest pathway to you will start to inform your vision. And so really what you're doing is you're just creating a stronger and stronger resonance field between you and a house that already exists. And part of that will mean that house is actually for sale. You're not going to drive somebody out of the house just so you can have it. So it's all very mechanical, but on a cosmic level, on a cosmic consciousness level. And that's based on the fact that everything is connected. This is just one of the fundamental metaphysical facts we know for sure, is that everything is connected. And it's the intelligence of a thing. It's like the house is a set of intelligence. It's a set of vibrational realities. It's got 3 bedrooms. It's in this neighborhood. It's even this color. It's available. It's within your price range. All of these things, all of that is like an informational packet that the house embodies, right? But on a certain level, on the mental plane, all that information is a real tangible object. You might look at it in that way. And so you then are on the mental plane creating this pattern, and the more closely it resembles this particular house, then the more those two become identical. And then when they reach an identity parity, nothing is going to keep that house from you or you from moving into that house. I mean, nothing. It will happen.
So, Michael, that's great. But what about all the ones that don't materialize? The prayers? What's going on here?
There we get into the area of self-knowledge, because you have to, you want to, so many people say they want something, but they don't really. It's like, the way a lot of people, their retirement plan is winning the lottery. So So, they think they want to win the lottery, but what we know about lottery winners is most of them, it ruins their life. They go bankrupt. The money just explodes their life. And then, and if they have an addiction, oh my God, they have an addiction which was only kept in check by not having the money to feed the addiction. Now they have all the money in the world, man, you're off to the races. You're gonna dive into your addiction.
Michael, I'm talking about prayers that people really desperately want, like healing or from this and that. Life and death matters.
Right.
So they don't always get answered. Could we sort of strike that point there?
Well, you have to realize that the time to pray for safe airplane travel is not when the wings have torn off and you're plummeting toward the ground. A little late, right? So this is where you might call it preemptive prayer or foundational prayer, or it's where you habitually accept divine protection. And this is way, way, way before you ever get on an airplane. You accept divine protection. You just trust God that God will take care of you. That way you never get on the plane the wings are going to fall off. You just there won't be a resonance there. Because a plane that is unsound, mechanically unsound, or in the schedule, there's going to be a pilot flying the plane who's going to be impaired. All of that's already known. In the mind of God, everything is known. And it stretches out a ways into the future so that, it's predictable. So if your seed idea is one of complete protection, there is going to be no connection between you and that plane. So you will never get on that plane. So how
come we all end up dying?
Well, that's didn't they tell you about that in the brochure? It's there. It's in the fine print. You will die. We'll all die. But here's the thing, and this is kind of important to get. So there's a tremendous advantage to dying, to having a limited life cycle. Well, number one that I can think of is that imagine the credit card debt you could accumulate if you didn't. You could be paying the minimum forever. That's also why it's a good thing nobody can remember their previous lives, right? We believe in reincarnation, but it might be true, it might not be. I happen to believe it does, that it is. But if it was really provable, then you'd be born into a new body and there would be your credit card company waiting for you. Now, I'm using credit card as a metaphor, right? Talking about debt. There's got to be a way to clear the debt. And a lot of the debt is like that skin of the snake. It's very thin and it's just circumstantial. It only relates to this lifetime. So that when you die, all of those minor things get sloughed off and you're put back into you're given a fresh start. Now the patterns, the ingrained patterns, the patterns on the skin of the snake, those are going to carry forward. So the deeper patterns, and those, by that I mean your character, that's definitely going with you. That you do take with you. So when you're born into a new body, you're the same person. You just got a clean slate and your memory is wiped, so you're not burdened by the sadness and all of the turmoil or pain and everything of your previous life. So that's just as an example, whether you believe in reincarnation or not, you can just use it as a metaphor. But the reason some prayers don't get answered is because there's just too much underlying counter prayer. It's like, or you can say a prayer and let it go, but then with your actions, do something contrary to that. So you're praying for a house, like that example, and it's going to require a down payment. So you got to save your money. But you're praying for a house, but then you go buy a new car. And that takes away from your savings and away from your down payment. That's a countervailing prayer. You're with your actions, you're praying for something entirely different and contradictory to what for your prayer for a house. And as for health, you can't pray for good health and violate basic health rules. If you deprive yourself of sleep, or if you eat junk, or if you don't exercise, just the basic stuff. If you don't do any of that stuff, how can you pray for health in your mind while with your body, you're negating your prayer?
Like a living prayer, right?
Yeah. Yep. Or say you're divorced and you want to get married again. You want a new partner. So you're praying for a new love relationship, but you're still hanging on to the old one. That's not going to work. That's actually a recipe for disaster. So you've got to first clean that up before you initiate a new prayer. Otherwise, you're working at cross purposes with yourself. This is no different than building a business, in developing a business plan and saying how you're going to make your money and then not following it. Prayer is the same exact thing. Oh, and there's one other thing too. It's like the Sufis have this saying. They say, pray for what you want and then pay for it. So you may pray for that new house, but inside you believe that a $3,000 or $4,000 payment per month is outrageous because you're still thinking in terms of 1972 dollars, right? Whereas in 2024, $3,000 or $4,000 is kind of an average payment for a house because price of real estate. But because you believe that that's too much money to pay, that blocks your prayer. You're not going to get that new house because you won't accept the payment. You won't pay that amount of money for it. But if you can deal with your issues about money and get over those, then that extra money that you need will come to you because it has to. In order for you to have the house, you have to have that additional money, and it'll surprise you. It'll come to you in a way that you may not expect, It's very mechanical. You have to look at this as strictly mechanical. Doesn't matter whether you're a good person or not. Doesn't matter how many sins you have. Doesn't matter how many skeletons you have in the closet, what you've done in this lifetime or any other. None of that matters at all. What does matter is whether or not you can accept the thing you're praying for. If you've got a lot of sins in your background and you've got a really guilty conscience about them, and you've let that guilty conscience convince you that you are unworthy to have anything good in your life, to have the thing that you really want, you're not going to get it. It's just not going to happen. But if you go in there and do that inner work to resolve those inner things, to get square with your own conscience and ask God for forgiveness and let him take it away. And, you know, it's still there, it still affects you, but in a positive way now. Then pray for what you want and you'll get it. Because that pattern that would otherwise block it from happening is gone. And now you've got a clear shot at it. Everything has to be in alignment. And the beauty of it is we determine the alignment, whether it's going to happen or not. We make that happen. That's what we do. And if it's something really deep, really fundamental, then, you know, that's got to be worked out too. And you'll have to get that straightened out before you can really progress in your life in these other ways. But that's what shadow work is for. That's what meditation is for. You know, we work on these things. It's like combing out the tangles in the subconscious and the deeper parts of the subconscious, because that's where the real power is. You know, it's not just what we believe, but it's what Werner Erhard called the is. It's what is for you. And the example he gave was kind of funny. He said, referring to the Salem witch trials, those people killed those women because for them, witches are a reality, right? So that's a very deep thing that really controls your actions. So you want to look at what is for you, what's not just a belief, but I'm sure you get the difference. There's a belief, and then there's what you know. That's what he's talking about. It's what you know. And whether that's true or not, doesn't matter. It's if you know it, that is a powerful determinator in your life. So if your life's not working, you want to start examining the what is of you. You want to get in there and say, what do I know? What do I think I know, right?
Can I share something on that?
Sure.
Hang on, I'll unmute myself properly.
Yeah, you're on.
The kind of along the lines of what Lorraine was saying is when we're talking about prayer, and you know, we wonder sometimes why some things seem to escape us. So, you know, there's that frustration sometimes. And the other day I was thinking about something along the lines of what you desire is already with you, like the name Emmanuel and what that means, God with us. Everything that we desire is really with us, except that we're searching for it. And when we are in that searching state, you're talking about what you know. If you know that it is with you, then your mind goes from a place of searching to one of accepting instead. And so this is where the prayer of acceptance made sense to me, because, you know, I think most of us, if we had any kind of a religious upbringing, a lot of the time the religious upbringing was when you pray, you would ask for something as if you don't have it, as if it's something that is off in the distance, and you'd have to jump through a series of hoops in order to receive said prayer. But the truth seems to be that God is with us, and when we're capable of when we're able to accept that which we desire, and in doing that means our whole life has to align with that. You know, we would change the way that we do things according to the belief that we can accept that gift. Something along those lines. Anyways, I could go off on a tangent with this, but I think that it's a pivotal moment for me to realize that if that which I desire is in a sense with me, I simply have to accept it in order to realize it.
Okay. All right. So let's take a concrete example. Say you want to get married, So you're young, you're just starting off, you want to get married, and everything's in line, but you need a wedding ring. And so you go to the store and you go alone, your first trip to the jewelry store is going to be alone so that you can kind of get the lay of the land, And there's the ring, you see the ring you want. It's right there, just like you're describing, the thing you want is right there. But it's under glass, right? And that glass is, and even the jeweler brings it out and lets you handle it and look, oh yeah, this is the ring I want. But within you, there are multiple layers of glass that are separating from that ring. And it might be money, it might be timing, could be any number of things. But the real thing, the most powerful part, is whether or not you really want to get married. Are you ready to make that commitment? And if there's part of you that's not ready to make that commitment, that's the thickest layer of glass it is. That becomes a 2-inch thick piece of plexiglass. You're not going to get through that with a blowtorch. So you see, those are the things you have to, you pray for what you want, but are you willing to pay for it? Because when you get married, you choose this one person and you reject all others. And if you're not ready to do that,
it's a deep concept, because when we say, are we willing to accept something, it's not just merely willy-nilly accepting it. It means believing, it means knowing that you can have that, say, it could be this freedom from something, or when you really I think this is where the quiet your mind comes in handy, because when you really sit with something, you really get to see those other voices saying you can't have that, or you hear these voices that you're like, who the hell's talking right now? It's like, and you start to see the contradictions in your thoughts that are contradicting your prayer. Your prayer might be one of health, but then there's a voice saying, actually, you're going to die. Your life's almost over, whatever. There might be voices telling you things that contradict the truth of the matter. And really, like when we look at the cycles of 7, we can see that the end is always the beginning, and that there's this regenerative movement, and our mistakes and errors of our past that we reconcile. It's a regenerative process, and it's always built upon those things that we cherish, those things that are that we really value are always embodied in what we carry forward. We don't lose them. And so the memory itself is not necessarily lost or wiped, but embodied. So it's really integrated. And so all that to say that there's this little speck of hope always that's there. And that's kind of pulling us towards something better than where we are. And quieting the mind seems to be a way of facing those things that are kind of like blocking us from moving in the direction that we really want to go.
That's beautiful, Jesse. That's exactly what it is too. That's, New Thought, they say that's the Jesus Christ of us. It's that glimmer of hope, that star. It's like the Star of Bethlehem. It's transcendent. It's the perfect version of ourselves that calls to us into greater and greater perfection. That's like the grace of God. That's the Jesus Christ. That's what, as a symbol, that's what Jesus Christ symbolizes. Jesus Christ is Jesse Christ. It's Michael Christ. It's Lorraine Christ. Tom, Renee Christ. All of us. That's the perfected version of us. That's the potential. That's the image and likeness that we were of God, that we were made of. You see, so that's always present in all of this cycling in and out of earth experience. that has built up a body that yearns for that. And this is where the unnatural part comes in, because we have to kind of hammer this thing into shape so that it more closely resembles that, so that there's a resonance field between us and the perfected version of us, so that more and more of that can enter into us here, and we become more and more Christed. You see? So yeah, that's what we pray to, you know, that Star of Bethlehem, that exalted, that's the real you that you connect with. And then from there, you back, it's like I tell you to back up into, you know, your spine, when you lean against your spine, when you go into meditation. When you really connect with your higher being, then do that with it, you see, because behind it is God. That's the greater field.
Hmm.
So, but you can't get there from here. You got to go, you have to go through the mediator. You see, this is Jesus, this is the Jesus Christ as mediator. You connect with your higher self, you get into your higher self, and then from there you connect with God.
That makes sense. I thought, I didn't take the mediator. Didn't realize the mediator was the mediator at first.
Yeah.
So you think that's the place, and then, but you know there's more. That's the other thing. You know
Exactly.
there's more.
And that's the more, you see.
Interesting.
Yeah, isn't it?
I watched the movie The Pilgrim's Progress. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's kind of like a cartoon, but it's really deeply symbolic and profound and moving. And I just watched it with the kids, and you know, it's a really good teacher, but also like there's so much more just for the adults watching it than there is for the kids. And there's one part in the movie where the pilgrim sees an old man in an iron cage, and he's suffering and he's moaning and he's in agony, and he looks over at him in the cage, and he sees that the door of the cage is unlocked, and there's this golden key in the door, and he picks it up and looks at it, and he asks the man why he's suffering, and the only thing he could say in his agony is no hope. And the movie carries on and goes on, and this pattern of hopelessness is the very thing that enslaves us or traps us in our perpetuating in the self what would you call self-imprisonment. So yeah, something about hope is very liberating. It gets us out of just about any situation, and it has something to do with the knowledge that there's more than what you see. Something, it's connected to that. Just knowing that, you know, seems to be all you need to get out of any situation.
Yep.
So
yep. You go into meditation and you encounter the veil within you, and you know that something's behind it because you can feel its energy, you can feel its presence. See, that's it. That's the Star of Bethlehem inside there. And so that draws you. Now, see, here's the real danger is in losing hope is then you start to you go and you get depressed. You know, depression, and depression can turn into nihilism. You know, nothing means anything. This is all empty and meaningless. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because then that leads to resentment. And once you allow resentment to take you over, then you start looking for revenge. And that's where malice enters into the world. See, that's the root of all evil, you might say. So that hope is very important, and that's a primary role of the churches. You know, that's the entry level of religion, is to give people hope. And that's why there's the promise of an afterlife, you know. But once you get that down, then they take you in the back room and say, look, this is the pattern, but what you're really looking for is your true self. The kingdom of heaven is not out there, and you don't have to die to get there. It's within you. And what has to die is the ideas that you have about yourself as a separate being, you know, as a person cut off from God. You have to get rid of all that, and then you start to realize that divine self within you. See, then Bob's your uncle at that point. You're off and running. All things are made possible through Jesus Christ, through the mediator. You get in touch with your own higher self, and then get there, then look around. Don't identify with the outer circumstances or your physical body or your mind or any of those things. There's the real you is much greater than all of that.
It's 12:21 right now. I don't know why I noticed that, but
Oh yeah. Something pivoted. Well, okay. Is there anything we haven't covered that you would like to go into? If not, I think we could probably bring it to a close. And thank you very much for being here. Mary Beth, nice to see you. And Julie, you're still here? Glad you could attend. And so be sure to practice. Try to take these principles in mind. You know, go in meditation and sense that vast space behind you. Lean back into it. Get a sense of that veil, and just listen for what's going on behind the veil. And you can even experiment with it. You know, if you have a question like what you should do, you know, about a decision you should make, or something mundane, something that is up for you, try asking it, you know, reach through the veil and ask your question, and then be quiet and let go of it and see what comes up. Because it will come up and especially if your expectation is high, and your expectation is called faith, right? Faith isn't believing you're going to hear something. Faith is knowing that you're going to hear something because you have to, because you've asked the question to God, so God has to answer it. In the Bible, in the New Testament, that's where that woman comes to the landlord in the middle of the night, banging on the door. The landlord says, "What? I'm in bed. Why are you knocking on my door this time of night?" He said, "My children are hungry. They need some bread. Give me some bread." "Go away, woman. Come back tomorrow." Bam, 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 bam. "I need bread." And this goes on and on. Finally, the guy gets up, gets some bread, opens the door, hands it to her, just to get rid of her. Why do you think Jesus told that story? See? You got to have that kind of chutzpah. You know, you got to get in God's face sometimes. And I'd say, "I'm not going away until you do this. I need this. Do this for me." But you got to really know that you want it in order to do that. So you can't be tentative. You can't be timid in prayer. You can be loving and worshipful and all of that, but that element's got to be there too. So do your homework, go within and see what's blocking you. See what's getting in your way. It's either a doubt or something that is for you, you know, it's an is. That's doing the work.
Yeah.
It's getting in there.
The timidness, I think, for me comes from doubting that I deserve that thing. Like it's almost uh basically, you know, when you know you can have something, you ask a whole different way, you know. Like I think of my kids, prime example.
Yeah, just you know, if I were an unscrupulous teacher, if I had my own agenda and just wanted to use you, I would manipulate you to think that you don't know anything. You can't know anything, only I know. And so you need me to tell you, right? That's a perfect scam because I've got you for life. You see? And that's a pitfall that spiritual teachers fall into regularly. And the church raised it to the institutional level. You are a sinner. The only way you can not go to hell is by coming every Sunday. You see, you miss a Sunday, that's it. You see, that's manipulation. So we don't do that. I mean, you know, not if you're a real spiritual teacher, you don't do that. You tell people like Jesus. Jesus is a real spiritual teacher. He said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. It's not in the temple, it's within you. You see? And everything he taught was to reveal the divinity within each person. He taught them how to heal, taught them how to pray and get their prayers answered. He taught them how to commune with God and to receive the Holy Spirit, right? Which is the essence of the background of the universe, that vibratory quality of the universe, the energy. That's the energy. It's the Shakti. It's the, you know, it's the vibrancy of the background, right? And out of which everything that's created gets created. So that's what we want. That's what self-realization is. It's seeing God within yourself and then gradually letting it take you over. You know, like Jesus said, I must decrease so it can increase, or Paul said that. And Jesus had actually gotten out of the way to the point where he was the full manifestation of the Christ being within him. That's why he's, you know, why he's at the top of the hierarchy for this planet. But that's what he said, you know, everything that I've done, you're going to have to do too. I am the way, I'm how this happens. You know, do it the way that I do it and you'll get there. And then it's all laid out in his teachings. But, you know, there's such a layer of interpretation over his teachings that has to be broken up. You know, it's become case hardened, which is a metallurgy term where metal part, if it wears on something, the skin of it just gets super dense and can't penetrate it. That's what the teachings are suffering from, is a case hardening where there's a layer of interpretation that has to be broken and penetrated to get into the real heart of the teachings. And that's what we attempt to do in these classes, is to break that up so that we can look at these things from a new perspective. And that's pretty cool. All right, guys. We good?
Thanks for the class, Mike.
You bet. It's my pleasure. It's always great having you guys, and appreciate you being here. Okay.
Till
Take
next time.
care. All right.